Let's take a look at this map to get a sense of clarity upon this one. Now, just get what it basically means for us. This part you see over here, this part, this line is what is known as the Johnson line. Please read this. Johnson line is the international border between India and Tibet, space bracket China, in the western sector, right? International border between India and Tibet, space China, in the western sector, right? And it runs from the entire region of Ladakh till Nepal. So the border which was marked by the Britishers in 1867 as a border between the Tibetan regions and Indian regions is what is known as the the Johnson line. And just to point out a very particular simple fact, that these areas were claimed by the Tibetans as their own areas. The Tibetans said that this region is entirely our region. But the Britishers had gone ahead and marked these areas to create a bit of a presence on the Tibetan region to be able to ward off any kind of a possible attack from the same altitude. You see, this is an elevated platform which allows the armed forces stationed in this region to look into the other side. So this strategic area was marked by the British as a part of the Indian territory, and the border by which it was marked as a part of the Indian territory, as you can see, is known as the Johnson line. So class, do we understand the way in which the Johnson line has been demarcated? Right, this is basically what is known as Johnson line, right? And another aspect of this was that the line that was created by the Britishers, okay, in this region over here, take a look at this, by which they attached this part into the British territory, this line came to be known as the McMahon line. Clear? So this was the Johnson line and this was the McMahon line. McMahon line was signed in 1917, and the definition of McMahon line, that it was the international border between India and Tibet from Bhutan till Myanmar. So both of these even today are our international borders, but according to India, these are our international borders even today with regard to how the Chinese are supposed to be dealt with. India says officially our international border in this area is the Johnson line in the western sector. So Johnson line goes from this point till this point, which means it goes from Ladakh till Nepal. Then there is Nepal, then there is Sikkim, then there is Bhutan, and then you have what you call the McMahon line. So it is the Johnson line and the McMahon line together which form India's claims on international border with China. China's alternate idea to this is what is known as the line of actual control. China says that these areas which were taken from the Tibetans, these areas are supposed to be given back by India, and China gives an alternate idea of what it called the line of actual control. You see, so China gives the concept of the LAC, line of actual control, which is marked in black over here in the western sector, and LAC, which includes Arunachal as a part of China, in the eastern sector. You see the point? This is the claim that the Chinese make with regard to it. So I want you to take a understanding of what is our political position upon the matter with regard to the Johnson line and the McMahon line, right? The Johnson line in 1867 and McMahon line in 1917, which was signed between India and the Britishers, right? Sorry, Britishers and the Tibetans. And when the Chinese came into power and they acquired Tibet, they said that the parts of Tibet which were acquired by the Britishers under the Johnson line and the McMahon line, these parts have to be taken up back by the Chinese. And Chinese said that the real Indian-China border must not stand at McMahon Line and Johnson Line, but it must stand at what is known as the line of actual control, LAC. And in the LAC, China in a way started showing the parts of Tibetan regions which were according to them attached by the Britishers by force in the British Indian territory as their own parts. And this line the Chinese started calling the line of actual control. So can you get a sense of what I mean to say in this diagram? The one which is running in purple and green, that is the Johnson line. Johnson line runs from Ladakh to Nepal, and the one which is running in purple and green from Bhutan to Myanmar, this is known as the McMahon line. Johnson line is India's international border with China in the western sector. McMahon line is India's international border with China in the eastern sector. Both these lines are rejected by the Chinese, and as an alternative, the Chinese have given a line known as the line of actual control, and that line of actual control places parts of Tibetan plateau in both the western sector and in the eastern sector. In the western sector, it includes the Aksai Chin region, and in the eastern sector, it includes the Arunachal region as a part of their own territory, right? And that is the point of distinction and difference between the Tibetans and the Chinese, or between the Indians and the Chinese with regard to international boundary. India has a different map of how the international boundary should look based upon the Johnson line and the what you can call McMahon line, and Chinese have a different mode by which they look at the McMahon line and Johnson line. They don't accept the McMahon line and Johnson line, calling them imperial activities done by the Britishers, and they give an alternate line till which they want to control the territory which belonged to Tibet. And this alternate line is what is known as the McMahon is known as the line of actual control, right? So a very simple question: what is India's official position upon the India-China border? Johnson line in the western sector and McMahon line in the eastern sector, right? What is China's official position? Line of actual control. And the Johnson line, McMahon line is an agreement which was signed by the Britishers. We have inherited that agreement from the Britishers upon the transfer of power, and these territories politically are belonging to us, acquired by the Britishers. These territories belong to us. That's basically what we claim. Chinese claim the reverse. Chinese claims these territories were acquired by Britishers by force and fraud, and therefore the Chinese are going to reset this because all of these territories belong to Tibet. Tibet now belongs to China. Therefore, these territories belong to China. And the alternate idea that the Chinese have given in the context of this is what is known as the line of actual control, right? That's basically we want to understand.